Hi, my name is Phoebe and welcome to my video tutorial on how to configure SES and Lambda to receive custom domain emails through Gmail. So the goal of today's video is first to show you some key resources and the process flow of how it's going to work. We will then work into setting up an S3 bucket for this purpose, creating an IAM role and policy, setting up then in MX record, setting up a Lambda function, and then we will configure our SES receipt rules. The last step is definitely to give this a test, and we should be all set. So just a quick overview, this demo is actually recorded by a Kaltura tool, and Kaltura is a video technology company, and I'm working currently as my day job as a technical success manager. So if you'd like to learn more about Kaltura, I've included a link below as well. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. The first article that I wanted to share with you is the GitHub AWS Lambda SES forwarder code. Here you'll be able to get a quick overview of the limitations and the process flow of how the code is. And for my Lambda function, I actually leverage the index.js code seen in this GitHub function. The second tool, the second resource that I wanted to highlight was actually this AWS blog post, which actually shows you, it gives you a good process flow of how this solution will work. So basically, it just highlights that the incoming email will actually be sent to SES, it processes it, saves the incoming message into your S3 bucket, and then triggers the execution of the Lambda function to retrieve the message, create a new message, and then forwards it to your mail server. So I definitely recommend that you actually access this resource. The next article that I want to share was actually my Medium article, where I've included the relevant bucket policy and codes. And I've also included some specific placeholders for you to key in, like the name of your S3 bucket or the name of your ARN resources. So let's get started. So here I'm currently in the S3 bucket page, and what I'm going to do first is to create a S3 bucket for the emails to be forwarded into. So email bucket 9901, it says, so I'm just gonna create email bucket 9901, and here I have email bucket 9901, and here I will be adding my permissions to the bucket. So for example, I have the bucket ID, and I'm just going to copy the bucket policy from my Medium article and paste it over here. So here, this is where you will include the JSON for your bucket policy. And then, okay, here we are. I'm going to insert my bucket name. And here it's important to highlight that we will need to keep the slash and the asterisk as well. And I'm going to call it email bucket 9901. As for my account ID, I can actually access it at the top. So this is 133, and I will include this here. And what's left to do is to just save the changes. And perfect. So it's successfully saved. I will next go into, we are now ready to actually move into the next segment, which is to create a IAM policy and role. So here under policies, what I'm going to do is to create a new policy. It's a custom managed policy, and I will get the JSON code from my Medium article again. It's a really straightforward process. And what this JSON does is to actually provide my Lambda function the relevant permissions to read and write into my S3 bucket. Okay, and it also gives the ability for SES to send emails. So what I'm going to do is to actually create email bucket 9901. Okay, and just enter the name of my S3 bucket, and then I'm all set. I would call this policy name Lambda SES policy, as it's a custom. And what I'm going to do is just to create policy. And you can see at the blue bar, the green bar at the top, which means it's successfully created. What I'll do next is to create a role. So I'm just going to call it a generic role. Okay. And here it's going to be Lambda for the use case. And then in terms of permissions and policies, what I'm going to do next is to see Lambda SES policy. So this is the policy that I just created. too long ago. And I'll create the name of the role, which is Lambda SES role. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm just going to click the policy. Yeah, just going to leave the description blank. And then this is the trust policy, and it includes the permissions that I have. So I'm just going to create role here. And yes, we're set. So we have our S3 bucket policy set up, and also our IAM. And now what I would currently suggest is you'll take a moment to add a MX record to your DNS configurations. So this is actually dependent on where your domain is hosted. For me, my domain was hosted on Lightsail, so this is where I would actually go in and add the MX record. Yeah. So there are a couple of different regions. So it also depends on the region in which your service is hosted. In my case, my functions and all my services are actually hosted in US East 1. So it could vary based on your setup. Yeah. So it's also important, and I wanted to take the chance to also highlight that all the services that you have been configuring should belong to the same region for it to work. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. And we are now ready to move into, I think, step 4, which is creating our Lambda function. So of all the steps, I would say this is probably the most challenging, but fret not, I'm here to guide you through. So I'm going to call this function Lambda SES function. And here, in terms of runtime, our code is compatible with Node.js version 16. So I'm going to click on it. Do note that it's important to select the correct runtime. I believe for Node.js 18 and 20, there is a different code required for that. So I am next going into creating or selecting this code for my Lambda function. And once I've copied this over, I will make changes under the configuration section. So as I shared earlier, this code is actually based off the GitHub code. And you'll be able to reference and get more details on that in the link that I'll be sharing as part of the video. Okay, so where we are here, we have created a function, I believe. Okay, and here is our interface. So we have created a function, and now it's the time for us to add in the code. So I'm just going to copy and paste it under the index.js field here. And this is where I would actually scroll up and make my changes. So I'm just going to expand it out so you could see. And what I'm going to do next is to actually make the changes. So for example, here, this is where you would insert the name of your custom domain. So I'm just going to include the name of my custom domain, which is phoebe@poop. This is actually the name of my side project, Pause of Poop. So yeah, it's interesting. And here I'm going to include the name of the S3 bucket, which I created earlier, which is email bucket 9901. And here, under the email key prefix, I think it's also important to highlight that we want to leave this string blank. And this actually really tripped me up when I was setting the entire Lambda function. So yeah, it's really super important to keep this blank. Next, we have our forward mapping options. And here, I'm just going to keep it simple and just include my custom domain, which is phoebe@pauseofpoop.com. And then the subsequent email. So for example, I had example@gmail.com, and I want to forward emails there. So this is how I would go about doing it. Once I'm done with this, let me click save. Okay, I've saved this code, and we're good. And once we're done with configuring SES, what we'll do next is to return to this page and subsequently deploy the code. So I'm currently in SES and the SES page, and what I want to do right now is actually to set up my email receiving receipt rules. So under email receiving, what I'll do next is to actually create a rule set, and I'm going to call it SES 9901 since we set it up earlier for this demo. What we'll do next is to actually create a rule, and the rule name here is, I'm just going to call it SES 9901 as well. for the purpose of this demo. And then here under the receipt conditions, it allows you to kind of define what kind of emails do get sent to your Gmail account. So here I want emails from my custom domain phoebe@powers-of-group.com to be forwarded to my Gmail account. So I'm going to click next. And next, this is super important. This is an important part where I create the receipt rules for delivering these emails to Amazon S3. And here I do have an S3 bucket already set up. So I'm going to use email bucket 9901 in this case. And next, I'm going to create the second receipt rule that I will create would be invoking of the AWS Lambda function, which I created earlier, which is Lambda SES function. And I'm going to click next. So once I'm done, I will just review the receipt rules, make sure all is good. And what you will want to see is S3 action and Lambda action here. You do have the ability to order the steps as well, but in this case, we are correct. And I will just create rules. It says to add permissions necessary for the Lambda function, so I'll go ahead and click add. And perfect, we have our SES configured. The next thing I would do is to go back to the Lambda function that we have here. And what I'm going to do here is to actually set up a test event. So this event name, I'm just going to call it test event. And what this Lambda test does is to actually create a structure for you to test out whether your Lambda function is working. I would say it does cover 90% of it does with a confidence level of maybe 90 to 95% tell you whether your test event is, or your Lambda function is working, but it's not perfect as well. So you might need to actually test it with the actual emails. But it provides a good gauge of whether your Lambda function is set up correctly. So what I'm going to do next is to copy the test event here, and what I would need is my function ARN. So I'm just going to click copy, click function.arn, and let me look for the place to actually input this. So what I'm going to do next is to create this, and I'm going to save this as a test event. So let's see. Okay, I've saved it correctly. And what I'm going to do next is to go back to code. It's loading. I will deploy the code that I earlier put in. And what I'm going to do next is to click test. Okay, perfect. Here we see that under the test event, my response is now, and that is the expected behavior. So what I'm going to do next is to actually use a separate Gmail account to forward emails to my custom domain and see if I do receive it at the allocated account. Yeah, so this is the end of the demo. If you do have any questions, please feel free to comment in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thank you for your time.